federal health care in this country is in crisis. And, look at this so-called big, beautiful bill last year.
Yeah, it's about to get a lot worse once those
Gave
Medicaid
$1 trillion
cuts
of
kick
tax
in.
cuts to the wealthiest among us while making changes to Medicaid that are going to cause an estimated 30,000 Montanans to lose access to their health care.
Welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Christy Branham.
And I'm Monica Haley.
Independents are making a go of taking the United States Senate by storm this November. Seth Bodnar has led soldiers, a public university, and businesses. Now the former University of Montana president is making a different kind of bet. He's running as an independent. He says Washington's two-party system is failing working families and that Montana needs a senator who answers to voters, not party leaders.
Seth, welcome to the Politics Chicks.
Well, thanks for having me, Monica and Christy. It's great to be with you.
We've been interviewing a stint of independent candidates where we had Todd Achilles on last week. We have Brian Bangs on next week. And you guys are all, we know that you guys have kind of a group chat going, right? All you independent candidates that are planning on caucusing together.
Well, it can be a little bit lonely when you run as an independent. You don't have a party. You got, at times you got both sides shooting at you. But so we have a group chat that goes and just kind of exchange stories and thoughts and support for each other. It's nice.
I'm sure that is nice to have a little camaraderie and be able to commiserate.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the path that brought you here. You joined the military at 18, graduated from West Point, became a Rhodes Scholar. Dude, you're only a little smart. And served as a Green Beret. What did those experiences teach you about leadership?
Well, it starts even earlier than that. I'm the son of two public school teachers. My mom taught kindergarten first.
Public school teacher right here.
All right. Thank you. I joked, like I was raised by school teachers. Just two of them happened to be my parents. And my mom taught kindergarten and first and second grade. My dad was a fifth grade teacher. And, from early in life, they showed me the importance of service, of stepping up and serving those around you and the joy that came from that as well. And, for me, going to West Point was a way to get a good education. It was a way to serve. And it opened up incredible opportunities for me. I feel very blessed for the opportunities I had in the military. The chance I got the chances I had to work with people from all walks of life, different perspectives, and the power of coming together around a common mission. I often tell folks, one question that never comes up when you're stacked on a wall outside of a door of a suspected terrorist safe house in the middle of the night in Mosul, Iraq, one question that you never ask or never gets asked: what party are you from?
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about the mission, and it's all about serving this country and taking care of each other. And the military taught me so many lessons and opened so many opportunities and gave me the opportunity to lead at a really young age. And I'm just deeply grateful for the privilege of serving in the U.S. military.
Well, I am the daughter of a serviceman. My dad served in the Army during Korea, and I appreciate the service. So thank you for your service. I am also the daughter of a nurse, and I am a public school teacher myself, and I have long said that the world would be a better place if it were run by teachers and nurses.
Yes.
And you have a little piece of that because you are a professor yourself, correct?
Well, I taught economics at West Point, but no, I'm not a professor. I led a public university a research university for 8 years without the right letters behind my name. I don't have a PhD.
That's still in education, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And education is core to who I am, and public education in particular, and the opportunity that it provides. Public education is really the engine of social mobility in this country. It's foundational to the American dream itself. So education is near and dear to my heart.
Agreed, 100%. What do you hear from voters in Montana about education? I have to admit that I don't know much about the public schools in Montana.
Well, our public schools are struggling, honestly. Last year, I think at the beginning of the year, we had about 850 unfilled positions across the state of Montana. Some of our schools have a 30 to 40% shortage of qualified teachers. Many of our schools, I was out in the eastern part of the state a few months ago, and I've been back there, and I'd been tipped off to this challenge, and I asked a middle school principal, excuse me, in one of our rural towns. I said, "What percentage of your teachers are Filipino migrant workers?" And she said about a third. Um, and and I just want to say thank God for those Filipino teachers who are willing to come and educate our next generation. But what does it say about us that we have devalued education so much and that we pay teachers so little that they can't afford to live in the communities that they serve? And we're doing a tremendous disservice to the next generation. We're also making what I think is a huge strategic mistake. Public education is vitally important as an engine of social mobility and opportunity, but also for economic prosperity and national security. And when I see our political leaders undermining an education and research infrastructure in this country that's the envy of the world, not only is I think it morally wrong, it's strategically really dumb. It's sort of like right before a boxing match starts, cutting off your right arm because China's investing in research. They're investing in education. India, same way. Other countries around the world, and all of these researchers that we're pushing out of our country. There's a lot of countries lined up trying to attract the best and brightest.
Yeah.
And that's a real shame.
That brain drain is just unbelievably dangerous for this country because a lot of the intellectuals are leaving because they are getting guffed and persecuted by the government. So I really can't blame them for not wanting to stay here.
Yeah. And making it economically impossible for them to stay.
Yeah. And you've said your life has been defined by service. When did that stop being an ideal and start becoming a personal obligation for you?
It's a great question. I think I've learned. You hear lots of quotes about the importance of service. Gandhi saying the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I think a great quote. I think Muhammad Ali said that service to others is the rent that you pay for your room on this earth. West Point, I learned. Yeah, I know. I think he said it. At least he's quoted. It's attributed to him. But so at West Point, the very mission of West Point is to build leaders of character for a lifetime of service to the nation. And so it really got drilled into me. And then, I became a dad 16 years ago, married to an incredible woman, a pediatrician, fifth generation Montanan. And we're really blessed to have 3 kids. We have twins who just turned 16 and a 12-year-old. And you see that we have an obligation to them to hand off a country to them that is in hopefully better shape than the country that we inherited. And we're heading in the opposite direction right now. And so, I feel obligated to my kids, to future generations. Honest, I feel obligated to friends of mine who gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country, who are in the ground, who, every veteran probably has a little bit of survivor's guilt that I deployed. I was lucky. I was really blessed. I came back unharmed, but others didn't. And so there's an obligation to carry on that mission of service and service to this country that they gave the ultimate sacrifice for. So I think service is, again, it is the way to live a fulfilling life. But you asked, when did it become an obligation? Well, I think it became an obligation when I became a dad, and when I think about the friends that I've lost.
Well, we're moms ourselves, so we certainly understand that pivot when you become a parent. Yeah. And I want to pick up on something that you said earlier. Your wife is a pediatrician, and that probably gives you a unique perspective on healthcare. And across the country, that is a major concern.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in Montana? Because in Minnesota, Christy and I are in the metro area and have access to great medical care. And the Mayo Clinic in Rochester is really not very far away. But the rest of Minnesota is becoming a desert of healthcare. Yes. And I can only imagine Montana geographically is huge. So what
Yep.
does it look like on the ground there for healthcare?
Oh, it's a crisis. We look at rural healthcare in this country is in crisis, and look at this so-called big beautiful bill last year. Gave a
Yeah, it's
trillion
about to get a
dollars.
lot worse once those
Yeah, gave
Medicaid
$1 trillion
cuts
of
kick
tax
in.
cuts to the wealthiest among us, while making changes to Medicaid that are going to cause an estimated 30,000 Montanans to lose access to their health care,
Oh my
and
God.
a $5 to $6 billion impact to our hospitals. And when you see that impact, which hospitals do you think are going to feel it the hardest? Rural hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
rural communities. They're already struggling. 2/3 of rural hospitals are facing financial crisis already,
Yeah.
and we will likely see rural hospitals shutting down. And this is really important for folks to be aware of, because when you lose a rural hospital, you lose access to what could be the only healthcare within 2 hours. But it's even worse than that, because you lose a key job center for a small town, really a hub of that community. And healthcare is in crisis. You're seeing premiums continue to skyrocket, costs continue to skyrocket. I think 2/3 of personal bankruptcies in this country are attributed to a
Medical
medical
debt.
issue, and actually a lot of those people have insurance, and so we have a healthcare system that's again, we have the greatest healthcare in the world, right? You probably see it in your neck of the woods with the Mayo Clinic. The problem
Yeah.
is many Americans can't access it and they can't afford it, and that's wrong.
We live
And
in the
it,
richest nation of the world, and yet people can't access healthcare because it puts them into crippling medical debt.
Yeah,
yeah. And we do have Mayo Clinic here in the University of Minnesota, which are two premier health systems. But the problem is not in the Twin Cities metro area and down near Rochester,
hmm,
where Mayo is located. It's northern Minnesota, where women are driving an hour and a half to get to see an OBGYN. They're
Or
driving two to
further.
three, yeah, 2 to 3 hours to see a specialist, so a cardiologist or an oncologist. And those are not being able to get to those specialties, especially for a woman with OBGYN and there's no local hospital. What happens if that woman goes into labor? She's going to sit in the car for 2 hours to
yeah,
go to get to a hospital. It's yeah, it is a crisis. And so I'm hoping that once things settle down, that healthcare is one of the first things that you all decide to address, because it is not in a good state in this
yeah,
country.
absolutely.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about conflict right now, because you took over the University of Montana during a period of enrollment and budget pressure. What did turning the university around teach you about governing through conflict? And you told us that you didn't have a bunch of extra letters behind your name, but you still managed to accomplish this. So tell us what happened and what you did and why it worked.
Yeah, look, you're right. I joined the University of Montana at a time when it was experiencing the largest enrollment decline of any flagship university in the country. We had a massive structural budget deficit, and really a crisis. And what I've learned in the military and business, but also in leading a university, is that the most important thing you need to do is align everyone around a common mission.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we did at the university is we embraced our identity, not as a defect, but as the core feature. And what I mean by that is, when the University of Montana, it's a high quality institution. It's focused on access too, right? And I used to say we would never be a university that brags about how many people we turn away. I'm going to pause there, because think about most colleges. How do people say, "Oh, that's a great college"? Their acceptance rate's 5%. What's that have to do with the quality of education? Nothing. And we said, you know what? We're never going to brag about accepting only 5%. We're going to brag about accepting 95%, charging them a rate of tuition that's 30% lower than our public university peers in the West. Then it's 1/10 of what an Ivy League school charges. And we're going to be proud of the fact that we have a third of our students that are Pell eligible, that are first gen college students. And we're still going to produce Rhodes Scholars and Truman Scholars, and have an acceptance rate to med school that's in law school that's 20 to 30% higher than the national average. And the reason I say embracing that is I used to define our mission at the university with just two words, and those two words were inclusive prosperity. Saying, you know what, it shouldn't matter where you come from, what you look like, who your parents were, who you love, how much money you have, what religion you practice or not, what political party you're part of. Everyone ought to have access to a world-class education. Now, here's the thing. That makes our jobs really hard. That means that we're never going to have enough resources. We're always going to be fighting and scrapping, but this mission is worth it. And so when you're in a crisis, you have to kind of align and say, this is our mission. This mission matters. And that mission requires trade-offs, and it requires making tough decisions about budget, saying, oh, what programs can we no longer do? Enable to invest in programs that we need to grow and that our society, that our state's demanding of us. So I think the biggest lesson I learned is just when you're in a crisis, when you're having a challenge, like just aligning people around that common mission and the importance of it.
As a K through 12 public school teacher, I love that you focused on, accepting everybody, and it's equal across the board, because in K-12 we don't have a choice of who comes into our classrooms. We are educating everybody that's there. And we have a late Minnesota Senator, Paul Wellstone, and I keep coming back to his mantra about we all do better when we all do better. Mm-hmm. When we are fed and clothed and housed and our healthcare needs are met, we do better. And when we as a society are educated, we do better. And that work in higher education is just going to take us that much further, which brings us back to what we already talked about. So side question, not really germane, but now I'm curious because you kept referring to it as a university. In Minnesota, it's U of M, like everybody calls it U of M. In Michigan, it's U of M. Is it U of M in Montana?
We like to say we're the real U of M.
Awesome.
Total side question.
Yep, it is. And it's funny because we, for 2 years straight, actually, in the NCAA tournament in the opening round, we played University of Michigan. So it was U of M versus U of M. And we didn't win. We were up by 10 points on University of Michigan, but then we faded and we ended up losing.
It's kind of like that race last night in Alaska where there are two candidates with the same exact
two Dan
name.
Sullivans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, why run as an independent? I'm fascinated to hear your answer because the one that we got from Todd Achilles made so much sense after he laid the argument out for us. So why don't you lay it out for us as well and tell us why that's the route you're choosing?
Yeah, I think, three reasons. One is it's authentic to who I am. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States at the age of 18 when I joined the U.S. military, not to a party. And I've always served this country. Second, leading the University of Montana for the past 8 years, I worked really closely with a Democratic governor and Democratic legislators. I worked really closely with a Republican governor and Republican legislators. We came together, we focused on a mission, we got things done, and we didn't do it from a place of partisan warfare. And so when you focus on the mission, I've seen your ability to actually get things done. And if we need anything in this country right now, it's forward-looking leadership that can bring folks together and get things done. And I think that's related to the third reason, which is I think this is the type of change this country needs. Right now, we're stuck in this kind of partisan doom loop where our political leaders seem to spend more of their time working to divide us and distract us to win an election than they're spending time focused on bringing us together to solve the very real challenges that we face. And so I think we need leaders in DC who say, you know what, neither party has a monopoly on good ideas. And I will work with anybody when it benefits the state of Montana and the United States of America. And I will stand up to anybody when it doesn't.
We have talked to so many candidates who have mentioned exactly what you just did, that there is so much more that unites us than divides us. Mm-hmm. And people sit down and they talk about the kitchen table issues, and they are uniformly the same across the country. And it kind of seems like maybe the running as an independent might be the secret sauce to bringing the two sides together. So we currently have two independent senators that currently caucus with the Democrats.
Right.
If you have a cohort that becomes bigger than just those two, would you try to caucus as an independent group, or would you lean more towards one party or the other?
Well, look, there's nothing in the Constitution that mentions the word caucus, right? That's the
Right.
way that parties get together. They plan strategies, they move things forward. My intention, I've said I don't intend to caucus with either party. My intention is to work with other independent minded senators to find areas of collaboration and areas where we can build bipartisan consensus to move things forward. And that might mean I might caucus or meet, right? The word caucus really means meet and plan. I plan to caucus with a lot of different people, and try to build enough momentum to move things forward. Whether that's immigration reform. I go around Montana and I talk. I say, I think I'm going to make three statements, and I'm going to ask folks to raise their hand if they agree with it. And statement one is that we should have strong borders and we should enforce our immigration laws. That's statement one. Number two, we can enforce our immigration laws without treating other human beings like animals and without having an unaccountable, masked, untrained paramilitary force trampling on the individual liberties of American citizens.
With electrocution gloves now.
Yeah. Statement three, we need clearer and simpler pathways for people to be here in this country legally. Does that, and 100% of the hands go up.
Yeah.
And honestly, that foundation for immigration reform, it's there. But it's not a matter of it being too hard. It's a matter of political will and having, folks that can work across the partisan divide to move things forward. And I think we could talk about healthcare. We could talk about all the various things where there's so much alignment among Montanans, but I think that applies to America more broadly. And I think independent leadership is really important to not, I've said before, I'm not running against Montana Democrats. I'm not running against Montana Republicans. I'm running against a national system that has become dysfunctional. And I'm running to try to bring some sense of collaboration and forward-looking leadership to the United States Senate.
Yeah, and Todd, when we interviewed him, brought up Teddy Roosevelt, and Teddy Roosevelt said that power remains in the middle. It's never on the side of the extreme. It's always in the middle. And that's very allegorical because in the Senate, you guys will have to sit in the middle if you are not caucusing with either party. And you will have a lot of power if there are four. How many would there be now if you all won it? There are two right now. You, Brian Bangs, Todd Achilles. I know I'm missing a
Nebraska. Yep.
Yeah.
So there could be, and there's an independent in Colorado. So 5. There could be up to 7.
Yeah. I mean, that is in the Senate.
That's formidable.
That is formidable.
It could become the fulcrum around which much of the policy that goes through the Senate has to to revolve. And so it's a but it's important. It's not even about power as much as it about being a catalyst.
Right.
One of my favorite presidents is Harry Truman. Harry Truman was a farmer. Harry Truman was he served in the military. Harry Truman went back to public life. And the quote I think that's most often mentioned when it comes to Harry Truman is the buck stops here. He was all about accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But the quote that I think most personifies how he led was when he said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when nobody cares who gets the credit."
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think independent leadership and my approach to leadership in the Senate would be, look, I don't care which party gets credit. I'm not about saying this is a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. It's an American bill. And let's come together to do right by the people who sent us to DC. And that's what I hope to be able to do in the U.S. Senate on behalf of the people of this great state and on behalf of Americans in all 50 states.
I want to go back a minute to something you talked about with immigration reform. In Minnesota, we were the target of a major, immigration crackdown with Operation Metro Surge, and it was truly traumatizing for Minnesotans, and especially in the Twin Cities. And you mentioned that in eastern Montana, a huge proportion of the teachers are Filipino immigrants, correct?
Yeah, well, in different schools, there's a lot of foreign teachers, and actually they're having trouble getting visas to have them stay. Which
That's what I was going to ask. What are you seeing in Montana for the issues under immigration?
Yeah, and the people. I mean, again, there's broad agreement that we should enforce our laws. We should remove violent criminals. Like everyone agrees with that, but we don't want a paramilitary force. We don't want the federal government trampling through our cities without accountability. And I think we fought a war over that couple hundred years ago, 250 years ago. And then they very clearly want to have pathways for people to be here legally. In fact, there was a gentleman in a small town in Montana called Freud, was picked up by ICE, imprisoned. It's in the far eastern part of the state, very conservative town. That town rallied around him. The guy had been there for many years, had a family, was a prominent, kind of successful small business owner. Now, agreement that, look, he needs to get on a legal pathway to be here, right? We need to make sure that people go through those processes. But he's not a criminal. He's been a member of his community, and let's make it easier for people to be here. And this is not a partisan issue. When you look at the Republican Party historically, I know, and right now the Republican Party is the party that seems anti-immigration. That's not always been the Republican Party.
No, it used to be flipped. Ronald Reagan was a proponent of immigration, and so
the last speech that Ronald Reagan gave, the last speech that he gave, I think it was his last act. He gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to two people. And one of them was George Shultz, the Secretary of State. The other was Mike Mansfield, the long-serving senator and an ambassador from right here in the great state of Montana. And I'm aware of that just because he and Marine. You don't talk about Mike Mansfield without talking about Marine. They were a team. And I walked past the statue of Mike and Marine on the way into work every day for 8 years at the University of Montana. And so I was familiar with that speech. But Reagan, in introducing these two, he talked about what he called the United States' greatest strength, immigration. And he said that we are unique among nations and that we don't cling to a stale past. We're always drawing our greatest strength, our people from every country around the world. And we're constantly renewing and enriching this country in doing so. They're from every other country, but they come here and they're American. And he said that were we ever to close our doors to new entrants, we would very soon thereafter cede our leadership position in the world. And a lot of Montanans still feel that way and recognize that. We want to be a place that attracts the best and brightest. We want to be a place that has a healthy labor force and workforce. We need immigration. We just need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need leaders who will champion it rather than just using it as an electoral issue to fight over.
That part.
Right. Yes, exactly. So you've mentioned the word accountability a couple times, and I'm really interested in hearing what accountability looks like for you, not just with the whole ICE immigration thing, but with the current administration. And what would you like to see happen should the House flip blue, which we, from all intents and purposes, very well could happen. We just see it coming right now. And the Senate, even with the independents, the Republicans no longer have the majority in the Senate. What does accountability look like for you across the board?
Well, you learn very quickly that in military leadership, that when I took over my first platoon in the 101st Airborne Division in Mosul, Iraq in 2003, you know that as a platoon leader, you're responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen in that platoon. And the important part is everyone's supposed to do their job. So what do I want to see happen in Washington, D.C.? I want the U.S. Senate. I want the U.S. Congress to do its job.
Yes.
You know, the
Yes,
Constitution.
more of that.
laid out, it created for us a system of checks and balances, co-equal branches of government. And Article 1 of the Constitution talks about which branch?
Congress.
Congress, right? Congress sets the laws. The executive enforces them. The executive enforces. The Supreme Court calls the referee. And right now we see Congress failing to do its job.
100%.
They've abdicated everything.
They've abdicated everything in the name of blind party loyalty. And that is why we're seeing the failures that we have. We talked about, Reagan's last speech. Presidents always talk about, and they always say what they mean at the end, right? Ike talked about the military-industrial complex. We could talk about that. He was right. George Washington, he talked about the way in which this republic, if we can keep it, as Ben Franklin said, he talked about the ways in which this republic could fail. And he talked about what he called the baneful effects of the spirit of party. He said that partisan factions can create in our fellow Americans this spirit of revenge. And he said that these factions, as he called them, could, over the course of time, become potent engines through which cunning, ambitious, unprincipled men could usurp the will of the people, or subvert the will of the people and usurp the reins of government for themselves. And when party becomes more important than country, that's when the republic fails. And you see examples of it, right? You have a war in Iran. And let's be very clear. I'm no friend of the Iranian regime. That regime is responsible for the deaths of friends of mine. But the founders were very clear in having, yes, a commander in chief who's in charge of the military, who makes those decisions, but Congress has to declare war. And that check is there for an important reason, because the commander in chief has to be able to articulate why this is an imminent threat. What is the strategy? What is the end game? When Congress abdicates that responsibility, that's how you lose a war in Iran, which is exactly what's happening right now. Yeah. So yes, what do I want to see? I want to see Congress do its dang job.
I don't think the founding fathers, or really anybody up until January 20th, 2025, would have ever imagined that Congress would just lay down, because that really is what they have done. So I'm with you. I hope that we get back to a functional Congress. So let's say that Montana voters send you to Washington. What are the first three things that you want to accomplish?
Well, I've told folks the first thing I'm going to do is work to set up a meeting with each of the 99 other senators. Say, let's sit down and
that's ambitious.
Let's see where are the areas of agreement. Where is there opportunity for us to actually get things done? I'm not going to Washington to just try to make, have news hits on MS Now or Fox News or I want to go get things done. And you only get things done when you understand where other people stand and where the opportunities for collaboration are. Now, we've laid out 3 pillars of our campaign. The great part of not being part of a party is you get to set your own platform. And our platform has 3 pillars. Number 1, to make the Montana way of life a reality again. Number 2, to invest in American competitiveness and security right here in Montana. And number 3 is to reform a broken and corrupt national political system. So 30 seconds on what's that each of those mean. Well, what's it mean to make the Montana way of life a reality again? It's a basic renewal of that social contract that sits at the foundation of the American dream itself, that says, if you're willing to show up and work hard, you ought to be able to afford to put a roof over your head. You ought to be able to afford to see a doctor without having to drive 2 hours to do so. And you should be able to make decisions about your health with your doctor in privacy without the government being involved. You should be able to send your kid to a good public school. You should be able to hunt, fish, and recreate on our public lands, our common ground. You should be able to retire with dignity. If you're a veteran, you should have the promises this country made to you honored. If you're a Native American, you should have the treaties that the United States signed with your sovereign nation respected and upheld and honored. I don't think that's too much to ask. Second pillar is to invest in American competitiveness and security here. And that means supporting our farmers and ranchers with common sense policy that opens markets for them, that creates more competition, that breaks up the monopolies we see that are taking so much profit and making it really hard for farmers and ranchers to get by. Farm bankruptcies in this country last year were up 46%. Mm-hmm. We're now a net importer of food. Who's fighting, standing up for farmers and ranchers? The third pillar is to reform a broken political system. You know, the fact that we do not have right now at this moment a real ban with teeth on insider trading by members of Congress
Right.
is shameful.
100%.
You
We were just
know,
talking
the
about that.
participation in these prediction markets, making $200,000 bets on oil futures 10 minutes before an announcement about the Iran war. Come on.
And a president selling immediate access to tweets that are
Yes.
going to impact the market for
Right.
$100,000 a
It's
month.
and Washington D.C. should not be a place where you go to get rich. It should be a place where you go to serve. And so we need to immediately eliminate those things. I'm calling for also term limits for the Supreme Court, for Congress, basic
Yes.
code of ethics for
Yes.
the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Age limits, age
The age
limits.
limits are also, we released a reform agenda that has age limits in there as well. It says that you should be 75 or younger when you're sworn in for a term in Congress, which means you could have an 81-year-old in Congress, but Congress shouldn't be a place where you go and sit for 50 years. You know, you can get a lot done in 3 terms in the U.S. Senate, almost 2 decades. Our founders said this is a civilian government. You go and you serve, and then you go back to private life, just like George Washington did. And this kind of lifetime career politicians where they sit there for 50 years, that's not doing well for any of us. So those are some of the big issues that I want to focus on, those 3 priorities. But I recognize that getting those things done is going to require building coalitions.
Well, I'm going to ask you something that may come a little bit from left field, but
Yeah.
I'm very troubled with the president's statements in the past couple days about scaling back the military exercises in the Pacific with the South Koreans.
With South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also touting his lovely relationship, his beautiful friendship with Kim Jong-un. If you were in the Senate, how would you be approaching that with your colleagues? Because Kim Jong-un is a ruthless dictator,
Absolutely.
and we have had South Korea as our allies for decades. So, how would you approach that with your colleagues in the Senate, and what would be your dream outcome for that?
Yeah, look, and I know a little bit about this. So I commanded a special forces team of Green Berets in 1st Special Forces Group. Our focus was on Asia. And I've done military training with the South Korean Army. In fact, had North Korea invaded South Korea, my team's mission would have been to launch off of a submarine off the coast of North Korea, swim in, and
Feeling
and
kind of
organize a
psychic right
resist-
now.
What's that?
I'm feeling kind of psychic right now. I did not
Yeah.
know that, but that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
So I know it's a thing or two about this, and you know what we need to do is, because the world is a scary place. Like make no mistake about it, and America needs to lead from a position of strength. We're safest when we're strong, but we're strongest when we have healthy alliances in which we're playing a leadership role. And to see our president and Republican members of Congress cozying up to people like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, while we are completely leaving allies that have stood by us. The fact that NATO is considering invoking its self-defense clause in the potential of a U.S. invasion of Greenland against other NATO members. I mean, this is horrible. You know, I stood beside NATO soldiers who came and fought and bled and died with us in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And to abandon them is shameful. It's also really strategically stupid, because no one can match our strength when our alliances are healthy and strong. And we have a lot of work to do to rebuild those alliances and to have our country regain its position of being a forward-looking, positive example of leadership in this world.
I hope our listeners are getting a picture of what you stand for. And Montana has historically been pretty red, but it's not necessarily, you can't pigeonhole it, because we've seen other things like these young people that sued for environmental damages and won. So it can swing either way. So I hope our
Yeah.
listeners are seeing the value in the things that you are telling us about, and that your voters see that
Yeah.
too.
Well, here's the thing in Montana right now, and I mean, just this morning I woke up to a text from a Republican legislator in Montana sending me the email that he just sent out to all his constituents endorsing our campaign.
That's
We've
That's
had
awesome.
we've had dozens of Democrats endorse this campaign. We've had former senators Baucus and Tester both support our campaign, as well as former chairs of the Democratic Party, Mary Sexton, Nancy Keenan. But we've also had former Republican Governor Mark Roscoe, who led the RNC, who chaired George W. Bush's reelect in 2004, endorse our campaign. The former head of the Montana Republican Party, Susan Giese, endorsing our campaign. And, a Republican legislator said this to me recently. He said, the fight in Montana right now is not between Republicans and Democrats. It's between the extreme and the rest of us. And we're building a coalition for the rest of us. We're building a coalition to serve all Montanans with common sense leadership to move this country forward. And we're building a lot of momentum. And this idea that, Montanans are just going to vote for a Republican or vote for a Democrat because that's the way they've done it. No, that's taken Montanans for granted, and it's not giving them enough credit. And I think Montanans want to vote for forward-looking leadership that's going to serve the important needs of this state.
I'm going to say it again. I think the independents could have the secret sauce to fixing some things that are really broken in our country right now. So thanks for stepping up to the plate and running.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about serious stuff, so let's do a lightning round, Monica, because I think it'll be fun to get some answers. And we can shake off all the seriousness that we've been talking
lightning
about.
rounds are always hard. These are hard ones. I didn't look at lightning round questions beforehand. So
Pretty sure it's not going to be as hard as being a Green Beret standing outside of a insurgent lair. So,
Yeah.
Morning formation or late night campaign call?
I love morning formation. I love when the day's ahead of you and it's full of potential. I'm a morning person.
Okay, I'm a big hiker. Love our parks, love the mountains. Tell me a trail in Montana that everybody should try out.
Ooh, that's a hard one because there's so many good ones. How about Sioux Charlie? There's a lake in the Beartooth called Sioux Charlie, and the hike to it is just unbelievable through this incredible canyon, and then meadows up to this lake. That's a good one in the Beartooth out by Nye, Montana.
I'll put that on my list.
Yeah. All right, let's do one more. One Democrat and one Republican that you respect.
Well, I can't talk about people I respect without talking about people like Mike Mansfield and Mike Mansfield, his service. And then people like, in history, of course, a lot of great Republicans. You mentioned Teddy Roosevelt, Ike. I think about Jeanette Rankin. Jeanette Rankin was the first woman in Congress from the great state of Montana, elected before women had the right to vote nationally. Proud graduate of the University of Montana, the real UM, and
Right.
a Republican who was incredibly brave and incredibly strong. And so I think there's great examples of true country first, courageous leadership in both parties. And I think that's, we can disagree about issues, we can disagree about the ways to go about them, but when we all come back to this commonality of being American and having our kids' best interest in mind, I admire leaders in the past who've embodied that.
And like you said, more that unites us than divides us.
And I love that you brought up Eisenhower because we were talking about accountability. And the night before the invasion on D-Day, he wrote a letter taking complete accountability in the likelihood that there was a failure that day and that it was not a success. And I think that just stands on its own 2 feet and shows you, he didn't say the buck stops here, but the buck stopped with him and he was prepared to take his lumps, and it would be some pretty devastating lumps, but he was not a coward and didn't walk away from them. He was
Right.
willing to take accountability for them. So
Yeah.
I love
Exactly
that.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, we ask this of every guest. What's giving you hope?
The going around this state, somebody asked me, "Oh, you must be exhausted." No, it's energizing because I'm reminded every day that Montanans are good and decent people and that they care about their neighbors. They want to see things moving forward. And again, you've said it a few times, Monica, there's more that unites us than divides us. I see that every single day. And I see Montanans who are exhausted, right? They're exhausted by the political fighting. They're exhausted by it being harder and harder every single day to make ends meet. They're exhausted, like a woman I met in Sydney, Montana a few weeks ago, getting a cup of coffee at a diner. And she said, I work 4 jobs. I work 4 jobs and I'm still having trouble making rent. So on the one hand, that's really hard. But on the other hand, they're exhausted, but they're hungry. They're hungry to come together. They're hungry to see forward movement. And you're going to have the ugliness that happens in politics, right? It's happening, right? The Democrat in this race has posted a picture of my face on social media with the letters POS written across it. Piece of,
And that's
what.
unacceptable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And then the Republicans have called me every name in the book. They've shared my personal cell phone publicly. So politics is ugly, but I'll tell you, I'm hearing every day from Montanans that they're so tired of that. They want to move forward. And it gives me great hope that despite all the challenges that we face, that Montanans and Americans can still come together and overcome those challenges.
I love that. Well, let's have you tell us where our listeners and our viewers can learn more about your campaign and your positions.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love for everybody to visit our site. It's www.sethformontana.com. So SETHFOR, not the number 4, it's FOR, Montana.com. Follow us on social media. We're posting as much as we can.
You have a pretty good social media game there. It's going pretty well for you. So.
Well, we're trying. We're getting around the state and we're trying to tell stories of the great people of Montana and what this campaign's about. So would love to have you engaged. Come on out to Montana and volunteer for anybody that wants to see our great state. We've got about almost 2,000 volunteers that have signed up already, and we're growing every day. And so I would love to get to meet some of your listeners and would love to have your support for what we're trying to do out here in Montana.
Last chance. Anything you want to share before we sign off?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having these conversations. Thank you for engaging in dialogue. One of the things I've said, we just celebrated 250 years of this great experiment that we call the United States of America. And this union, this imperfect union that's always seeking to become a more perfect union, only does so when people are engaged, when they're informed. And I want to say thank you to you, Christy and Monica, for having these types of conversations, and for all your listeners for being engaged in the process. That's what we need. We need people to be engaged, focused, holding our leadership accountable, renewing this government of the people, by the people, for the people. So just a huge thank you for the opportunity to be with you and the work that you do every day.
Politics is not a spectator sport, and thank you for stepping up to the plate to run, because we know what a big deal that is too.
Yes, thank you very much.
To our listeners, if you're finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, like an independent candidate from Montana, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're stronger together. Seth, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation today. We're grateful you were here.
Yeah, it was an honor to be with you. Thank you again.